Hello and welcome back to the Adapt Academy. So this is a free business course I'm putting together for my fellow contractors and just sharing a lot of the things that I've learned over the last 10 years. A lot of these things that I've learned just in the last few years, I wish I would have learned in the beginning. So whether you are new to business or you've been doing this a long time, I'm sure that this will be valuable. This is completely free. You can look at this. You can look at all this stuff. You don't have to put your email in or anything like that. This is just my gift to you. Like, use it, be more successful. And if you ever need marketing services, come hit us up at Adapt Digital Solutions. We provide the best marketing solutions for contractors. So my goal is to help you make more money so that you can pay my company for the rest of your life to help you make more money. All right, so today we're talking about know your overhead and break even numbers. So the first video that we did was talking about revenue versus gross profit versus net profit. So understanding what those terms mean. And I just want to say, like, a lot of this stuff, you start by just understanding what the word means. But after you've gone through the motions and you've experienced this a whole bunch of times, that's when concepts really sink in. At least that's what it's like for me. Like, I kind of knew what revenue, gross profit, net profit was in the beginning because, I'd heard people talk about it. But now that I've been through this for many, many years, like, I just understand it on such a fundamental level. And so just keep that in mind. Like, some of this stuff might sound a bit foreign to you. You might need to hear it a few times. I personally need to hear something like 7 times before it really sinks in. So I do my best. I'll do my best throughout this to kind of repeat myself a little bit. But there's a whole bunch of modules in here. I'm adding more as I go. A lot of these haven't been made yet, and we're on number 2 today. So talking about overhead and break even. So overhead, what is overhead? Overhead are all of the costs associated with running your business that are not related to any specific project. So if somebody, let's say I have a deck building company, if I have a customer pays me to do their deck, that would be the revenue coming in. And then I have to spend money on labor and materials to build that deck. And whatever's left over would be my gross profit. And then I would take out my business expenses. So my truck payment, insurance, cell phones, computers, what else, whatever else I need that's not related to that project, that's my overhead. That gets deducted from the gross profit, and then the money that's left over at the end of the day, end of the year, that's my net profit. So overhead can be kind of a pain in the butt to know, and a lot of people don't know what their overhead actually is. If you've been in business a while, then the easiest way to figure out your overhead is to just look at all of your overhead expenses last year, and that's your overhead for the year. And you could divide it by 12 and get your monthly overhead. If you've been in business for 20 years, you can have 20 years of average numbers. Like, you kind of figure out where you're at today. And at the end of the day, like, how much money does it cost you to stay in business? That's the number that matters. It doesn't have to be super complicated. You don't need tools to track it. You just need to know that number. So however you do it, figure out how to track it. But that's my first kind of advice, is like, just track everything. It's super easy to not track everything. Therefore, it's super easy to have no idea what's going on in your business. I grew up kind of entrepreneurial. Like, my parents didn't really buy me a lot of stuff. If I wanted something, the default answer was no. And so, on the occasion that I would come across $50 or $100, $100 20 years ago was a lot of money. It's not so much these days. But if I would come across $100, I would just sit there scheming on what can I get with this $100. And people always said, like, oh, it's burning a hole in your pocket. But the reality is like, I wanted things, and money is a vehicle to get things. And so I was scheming on what could I get? What could I actually do with this money? And so I've thought about money a lot growing up. And so when it came to business, even from the beginning, I naturally did a lot of this stuff. And I realized that it just doesn't come naturally to everybody. And so that's what this video is for. If it doesn't come naturally to you, then listen to somebody that kind of got this stuff intuitively. And so tracking everything, like someone back in the day paid me to build a fence for them. Like I know that I'm charging $2,400, and I know that they gave me $1,200 deposit, and I would keep a notebook and I would write down like, okay, I got 1,200, and then I went to the store and I spent $400 on materials, and I had to buy a couple tools, and I'm gonna pay my friend to help me. So I'm writing all this stuff down and I'm keeping track. I get this money, it's like, cool, I got all this money, and then it's like, some of it's gone, some of it's gone, some of it's gone. The pile of money is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And I know that I really want to have some left over when the job's all done. And so the number one thing is just track all this stuff. If you have to track it in a notebook, track it in a notebook. I prefer to use like a program, an application. I use Zoho. Some people use QuickBooks. The nice thing about these is you can connect your bank account, you can connect your credit cards directly to it. So what I do personally is I have a business credit card, and I make sure that every single thing I buy for the business gets put on that credit card and nothing else. That way I know that if there's an expense on that credit card, it was for the business. I don't ever buy anything personal on that. That makes it easy for me to track. And then once a month I go through my bookkeeping software, and it automatically puts all those expenses in, and I just go through one at a time and I label them. What was the expense for? If it was for a job, I put which client it was for, and I just go through and I do that, and it takes me a couple hours every month, and then I forget about it. But now I have everything tracked. And so you can use apps like this to make it a lot easier for you. You get the bank account. Every time you get a check, any kind of money from a client, it goes into that bank account. Whenever you buy something, it goes on a credit card. Every time you pay that credit card, it comes out of that bank account. That's like the simplest way to do it. And if you just can be consistent that way, a lot of this tracking will happen automatically for you. If you're thinking like, oh, I should do that, then what you've probably been doing is the money goes all over the place, and it's like impossible to remember what's going on after some time. So this is how you can keep it simple. Back in the early days, I was just doing cash jobs, so I just kept track of it in a notebook. I physically had the cash in my wallet, and I was always counting down, figuring out like, how much am I going to have when this is all over? Like that's the nut. Like how big is the nut going to be at the end of this job? So we already kind of went over the three things, but you've got the revenue, you've got the job costs, and you got the overhead. So the revenue is the money that came in. The job cost is how much money it takes to do that job that money came in for. And your overhead is how much money it costs you just to be in business. So I already talked about this, like finding your own overhead is easiest if you've been in business a while and you've been tracking this stuff, because you just look, how much did you spend last year on overhead? So how much money did your business spend that wasn't a direct job cost? That's your overhead. And just average it out. And you might know like, oh, well, last year I had to buy a truck, and so my overhead was a bit higher. You can kind of feel this stuff out. Your business is your business. Your numbers are your numbers. And so you just want to know your numbers. Don't worry about other people's numbers. Worry about your own. And make sure that you make the profit you want to make. Like, that's the whole point, right? Let's see, the break-even math. So I just kind of went over that, but again, it's like when I do jobs, I'm always keeping track of like, what's the bottom line. If the client paid me $1,200 and so far I've spent $800, I know I've got $400 left before I'm breaking even. And my goal is to keep above that number. I never wanted to get to zero, and I certainly never wanted to get below zero. I don't want to fund my clients' jobs. A lot of guys do that. They just take payment when the job's over. They cover all the materials, they cover all that. I never do that. I've been stiffed before. I don't like being stiffed. So I always make sure that whatever it's going to cost me, the client pays for that at least. So I did a ton of research. I've watched a bunch of other YouTube videos out there about this topic, and there seems to be like three main camps of thought, like three kind of ways that people think about this. The first one, and I relate to this one, is price from your own numbers. And so I read a book called Markup and Profit a long time ago. It's by this Michael Stone guy. It's a very good entry level book on how to think about this stuff. It's very simple. If you're new to this, or you're looking for a nice like big old book to read about this, Michael Stone is an awesome guy. I think I don't know if I think his family runs the company now, but this guy has been harping on this stuff for like 40 years. Super cool dude. But the idea is you figure out like how much it's actually going to cost you to do the job, and you add in your overhead. So you've got the job cost, like when I'm building a fence, I charge $1,200. Let's say it's gonna cost me $800 to build the fence. Like I start with that $800, and then I also know that, let's just say it takes me a month to build that fence, and my overhead is $1,200 a year. So that would be $100 a month. So I've got the $1,200 that came in. I've got the $800 it's gonna cost to run that job. The job's gonna take me a month. So I have to cover 1 month of overhead on that job, which is $100. So the $1,200 minus the job cost, which is $800, I'm left with $400, and then I deduct my overhead, which is $100. Now I'm left with $300. So I will net profit. I will be left with $300 at the end when I've paid for the job completion and when I have paid for my overhead, paid to keep my business going. And so I figure all that stuff out. Like when I price a job, I do my best to know how much it's going to cost me. And then I do my best to know how much of my overhead needs to be covered by this job. And I personally like to add 10 or 15% to the price just for oopsies, for in case. Maybe I forgot some materials I need, or maybe something takes me longer and it costs me more in labor. When I take a job, I've always had this mentality. When I take a job, when someone pays me to do something, I'm doing it no matter what. If I accidentally didn't price it right and I'm going to lose money, it doesn't matter. I made a deal. I'm sticking to that deal. Now, it doesn't mean that I won't go to the client and be like, hey, I mispriced this. I'm going to be underwater. If you could cover another $400 or whatever, like that's how much the job actually costs. But if they say, no, I'm not covering it, you agreed to do it, I'm just going to do it anyway, because I do what I say I'm going to do. It's up to me to make sure that my costs are so accurate. So I take on that risk. That's why I add 15% to the price, to make sure that I'm helping cover my own butt in the case that I make a mistake. And that way, if I do everything perfectly, then I get a little bonus at the end. I made a little bit extra. So that's how I roll. There's another camp, and I call it like the job cost camp. So these are the companies. Usually it's like companies who are more mature. They go through a lot of jobs. They estimate projects, and then they really meticulously keep track of how much those projects cost. And it's like a cycle. So they estimate a project, they do it, they do the job cost report, they figure out how much it really costs them, and then that helps them on the next estimate. So I do this to some degree, but it's just never been like my style. I've never really had the business model where I had to do this hardcore. But if you're paying, if you have a team of estimators, like they should be doing job cost reports, and you have a big operation, you need to be tracking everything, and you have teams of people to do this. So that's the job cost camp. The third one, these are like the profit first guys. So if you don't know what profit first is, it's this ideology or it's actually more of a practice. Like I actually do profit first for my business, but I don't necessarily recommend it. So what it is I have a bunch of different bank accounts. I have one for income, one for operating expenses, one for owner compensation, one for profit, and one for taxes. So I have 5 different accounts. Every single dollar that comes in from a customer goes into the income account. All of it. It all goes into the income. And then from there, money moves from the income account to the other 4 accounts based on a percentage. That percentage is based off of my profit and loss numbers from last year. And so if my profit numbers are 50%, then 50% of the income money automatically goes from the income account to the profit account. And then some goes to owner's compensation, which is the owner's paycheck. Some goes to taxes, because I know roughly what percentage of my income goes to taxes, so the money automatically goes out. So for me, I manage the accounting of my company. So this doesn't really help me all that much. It just makes it so I have to do extra work every month. That's what I think about it. But if I had other people managing my money and managing how money moves around my accounts, I think that this would be a lot better, because what it means is I can log into my bank's online banking anytime and see exactly where I stand. I can see how much profit's in there. I can see how much is in the operation expenses. If the operation expenses is starting to get too big, then I know that I should be allocating more to the profit and the taxes and that stuff. Or if the operating expense is constantly running out of money, that means I'm not hitting the profit percentage that I thought I was. And so it lets you see at like a high level view at any time you want, kind of like where your business stands based off of those percentages. So in that case, it's very handy. I don't find it particularly useful because I already know all my numbers. I look at P&L statements all the time, and I just kind of know where we stand all the time. I'm really dialed into the tracking, so I don't really need to do the extra accounting. But I do it anyways because that's how I've been doing it for a while, and consistency is actually more important than optimization a lot of times. So profit first camp. If you're the kind of person who has a really hard time, money burns a hole in your pocket. I've known guys who they get a big deposit on a job, and then they go out and they buy a brand new truck, and then they're constantly running at they're starting other jobs to get deposits to pay for the last job, and their business becomes like a Ponzi scheme of construction projects. If you're running that gambit and you're struggling with that, then maybe profit first would be really nice for you, because you see your profit account, that's how much money is actually yours, and so that could help you be a little bit more responsible. So I'd say the profit first camp is more about controlling behavior. The job costing camp is more about really dialing things in, and the price from your own numbers camp, which is kind of where I sit, that's just more about making sure that you are making the profit you want. When it comes to my business, that's why I'm doing this. My whole philosophy, I wrote it down somewhere down here. My philosophy is I don't get out of bed if the math doesn't work. I'm not going to go work for a whole day if I'm losing money. I would rather stay home and lay on the couch. I can do that for free. And so I know a lot of guys who they work their asses off. They work for a whole year and they don't make any money, or they lose money. It's dude, you would have been better off just going to the park. So, I think if you can know what these numbers, know what these terms mean, and when money comes into your business, whether you move it to different accounts or you just keep track of it in a notebook or you keep track of it in a bookkeeping software, however you do it, as long as you keep track of these main things, you'll start to get a feel for it, and you'll know what's going on. You'll be in control. So super simple. If you're only going to track 3 things, you track the money coming in, you track how much money it costs you to actually do a job, and you track all your business expenses. If you can answer me on those 3 things, how much money came in this month, how much your jobs cost you this month, and how much business expenses you had this month, I can tell you a lot about your business, and I can tell you where you can focus to get more out of it. So check it out. Go to the Adapt Academy. You can read this article. Usually there's ways that you can even download the PDF if you like to have something on your Kindle or something to read. If you're watching this on YouTube, if you have questions, ask them in the comment section. I will read the comments, I will answer them, and then also your questions telling me what you think and what questions you have helps me make a better version of this video next time. And as always, like my company, Adapt Digital Solutions, like we're the best marketers for construction companies around. And I'll spend 20 minutes with anybody helping them. So if you want my help, find the link in the description, or if you're on the website, there's a lot of different ways to contact us. Contact us. Let's get together for 20 minutes, talk about your stuff, and talk about how you can do better. So hope that's helpful. Thank you for watching, and have a good day.